hope you guys are learning well and studying well. Today we are going to learn about risk management and all about risk management. Again, this is from paper 6. However, all of these concepts are very, very important for your exam. You need to learn, in fact, understand. Instead of learning, understand all the concepts, because this is the fundamentals and foundation for your PMP. Even though we have PMP 7th edition and 8th might come, but you need to understand the fundamentals. So let's dive right into risk management. So today we will be learning about risk management plan, identifying risks, how do we perform qualitative analysis and quantitative risk analysis, and finally plan the risk responses. So, risk management. What is risk? Risk is uncertainties. The things which you know might happen or you don't know. So risks are uncertain events. Assumptions are something where you assume something. You don't know, but you make an assumption. Risk is an uncertain event. It might or might not happen in your project. So there are two types of risk analysis. How do you identify the risks of your project, and how do you mitigate the risk happening? Risk can be positive or negative. Negative risks are called threats, and positive risks are called opportunities. So let's see what is qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. Qualitative risk analysis is done before quantitative risk analysis. It is a simple probability into impact matrix where you write all the risks and create a matrix if the risks fall under high risk category or low risk or medium risk category. So that is qualitative analysis. We will be learning, and I'll show you how the metric looks like. But just to give you an overview, there are two types of risk analysis: qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative risk analysis is done only and only if qualitative risk analysis has been done. You don't directly do the quantitative risk analysis. It is as simple as that. When it is done, it is qualitative. Quantitative risk analysis is done when the management needs the numbers, or first of all, if the qualitative risk analysis has been performed. Two, if the management is asking for numbers, the statistics. And three, if the project is very complex. Then only we do quantitative risk analysis. There are a few types of risk analysis tools which we use for the quantitative risk analysis. Those are Monte-Carlo analysis, sensitive analysis, EMV, expected monetary value, and decision tree analysis. You need to know all of these for your exam. So let's go through each one of them, starting with qualitative risk analysis. So as I mentioned, qualitative risk analysis is nothing but probability into impact. It is a matrix where you write down all the risk and its description with risk IDs. You write down the probability, how much probability it is for the risk to happen, and the impact of the risk. If it is high, low, medium, what's the impact on the project? You multiply these two, and that's the qualitative risk analysis. It's usually presented in high, medium, or low way in a matrix. It's a quick, simple analysis. Now moving on to quantitative risk analysis. First one is Monte Carlo analysis. Monte Carlo analysis is done with a lot of data. It's done with a lot of data. For example, if you put a lot of data into an AI, think of it as you're putting a lot of data into an AI platform, and you are asking it to run and say, what's the probability of this risk of happening, right? So that is Monte Carlo analysis. A huge data is needed to feed it. Usually you will see S-curve diagram in Monte Carlo analysis. Uh, as you can see in the S curve is what we have learned in the school days. It's a cumulative probability, right? And you get the simulation. You run the simulation and you get the uh, results, and you can make the decision according to it. Next is sensitive analysis. Most popular is tornado diagram. You need to understand what is tornado diagram. This might come in your exam. Sensitive analysis, and under which a tornado diagram is one of the tools, but that is the most important tool which you need to learn for the exam. Tornado diagram looks something like this. It is named tornado diagram because it looks like a tornado. Uh, it it prioritizes the all the risks, and you can see which risk you need to identify and resolve it as quickly as possible. So it's a quick visual tool, which will give you a number and a data where you can make a decision. Expected monetary value analysis, EMV. Don't get confused between EVM. We will come to that later. For now, just remember quantitative risk analysis. Uh, EMV comes under quantitative risk analysis. Expected monetary value, right? So we use the qualitative analysis which we did. The same matrix you see here, you have the same risk description. It is an add-on. Once that is done, you do this. Once you do qualitative analysis, you do expected monetary value analysis. That's the most sensible step after doing the qualitative analysis. You can get in qualitative analysis, you don't get the numbers or statistics which you need to show it to the management or for any reason. So you need the numbers for this. So here, what we simply do is multiply probability into impact, and we get the contingency reserve. Uh, we add all the probability into impact matrix, and we get the contingency reserve for the project. We just learned about contingency reserve in the previous video. So make sure you watch that video to understand what is contingency reserve and where it is used. Check out the cost management video. All right. So lastly, the decision tree analysis is another tool under quantitative risk analysis. It is the most comprehensive tool where you can get the real numbers and you can make a decision according to it. Like you see here, you can have multiple projects. It is easier to make decision what project is getting the most revenue ROI, or which projects, if you do, is have more chances of failure. So this is a very simple. It is a bit complex tool, but it gives you the most realistic number to make the decision. So it is again probability into impact, but for all the risks, and you can visually see which project is the most successful project, which if we take, we will get the most ROI out of it. So that is decision tree. Now you have the list of risks. How do you mitigate it? What do you do to take the steps? You create the risk responses. So here you list down all the risks and one by one with the team, and see which makes most sense, which risk response makes most sense for each risk. First of all, you'll have to segregate it into negative risks and positive risks. Which are negative, you need to identify which are negative risks and which are positive risks, and then accordingly you add the risk responses to each of the risks. Now let's see what are the risk responses and what are the strategies for each risk response types. So If you have the negative risks, if you identify any of the risks as negative, you can add any of these risk responses. Those are avoid, transfer, mitigate, or accept. So, what is avoid? Avoiding is nothing but just replacing a high, so eliminating the threat by eliminating the cause. That is avoid. For example, changing the scope. You just change the scope. So you are just avoiding. So what is avoid? Avoid is nothing but you completely change the route. For example, you change the scope altogether or cancel the project. That is something you are avoiding the risk. So that is one of the risk categories. Another one is transfer. You transfer the risk to the third party. For example, you you take an insurance for a risk. Uh, Again, if you're transferring the risk, understand you need to identify the risk before it happens. Once the risk has happened, you cannot transfer it. This is a very tricky question, which usually typically appears in the PMP exam. So uh, understand what is transfer and when it is done. Transfer is only done to the third party only when the risk is identified and it has not occurred yet. If it is identified and it has occurred, you cannot transfer the risk. Mitigate. Mitigate is you try to reduce the probability or impact of the risk event to happen. Accept is you do nothing. You just passively wait until uh, the risk happens. That is a very passive approach. You usually don't do that. Now let's move on to the positive risk strategies. Uh, there are exploit, enhance, share, and accept. Exploit is you eliminate the uncertainties and ensure the opportunity occurs. It's the opposite of avoid. Here you ensure it happens. Avoid, you ensure, you just avoid it. You you change the scope or you cancel the project. You avoid the uh, risk happening. Here you make sure it happens. Enhance is increasing the probability or positive impact of the opportunity to happen. Share is you share the risk with the other teams. So that is share. Allocate some ownership to a third party that can better capture the opportunity, or even if you share the opportunity with the other team, that falls under share. And lastly, accept. Again, this is similar to the negative approach. You do nothing. If it happens, it happens. If the risk doesn't happen, you just don't do anything. So these are the risk responses and what is risk management. How do you tackle it? Or how do you perform risk quality and how do you perform quality and quantitative risk analysis? It's all about risk management. I'll see you in the next one.